Okay. So tonight, I thought it'd be a good idea to look at Krishnamurti. And the book that I'm going to be reading from is On God. And it's a short passage, but I think it's very full and very rich, and it'll be good talking about it. The questioner says to him, "You never mention God. Has he no place in your teaching?" Krishnamurti, you talk a great deal about God, don't you? Your books are full of it. You build churches, temples, you make sacrifices, you do rituals, perform ceremonies, and you are full of ideas about God, are you not? You repeat the word, but your acts are not godly, are they? Though you worship what you call God, your ways, your thoughts, your existence are not godly, are they? Though you repeat the word God, you exploit others, don't you? You have your gods, Hindu and Muslim and Christian and all the rest of it. You build temples, and the richer you get, the more temples you build. Don't laugh. You would do the same yourself, only you are still trying to become rich. That is all. So you are very familiar with God, at least with the word, but the word is not God. The word is not the thing. Let us be very clear on that point. The word is not God. You may use the word God or any other word. Because you use it, it does not mean that you know God. You merely know the word. I don't use the word. I don't use that word for the very simple reason that you know it. What you know is not real. And besides, to find reality, all verbal mutterings of the mind must cease. Must they not? You have images of God, but the image is not God, surely. How can you know God? Obviously, not through an image, not through a temple. To receive God, the unknown, the mind must be the unknown. If you pursue God, then you already know God. You know the end. You know what you are pursuing, don't you? If you seek God, you must know what God is, otherwise you wouldn't seek him, would you? You seek him either according to your books or according to your feelings, and your feelings are merely the response of memory. Therefore, that which you seek is already created, either through memory or through hearsay. And that which is created is not eternal. It is the product of the mind. Now, I think this is important, what he says here. If there were no books, if there were no gurus, if there were no formulas to be repeated, you would only know sorrow and happiness, wouldn't you? Constant sorrow and misery and rare moments of happiness. And then you would want to know why you suffer. You couldn't escape to God, but then you would probably escape in other ways and soon invent gods as an escape. But if you really want to understand the whole process of suffering as a new man, a fresh man, inquiring and not escaping, then you will free yourself from sorrow. Then you will find out what reality is, what God is. But a man in sorrow cannot find God or reality. Reality can be found only when sorrow ceases, when there is happiness, not as a contrast, not as an opposite, but that state of being in which there are no opposites. So, the unknown, that which is not created by the mind, cannot be formulated by the mind. That which is unknown cannot be thought about. The moment you think about the unknown, it is already known. Surely, you cannot think about the unknown, can you? You can think only about the known. Thought moves from the known to the known. And what is known is not reality, is it? So, when you think and meditate, when you sit down and think about God, you only think about what is known. And what is known is in time. It is caught in the net of time and therefore not real. Reality can come into being only when the mind is free from the net of time. When the mind ceases to create, there is creation. I'll repeat that. When the mind ceases to create, there is creation. That is, the mind must be absolutely still, but not with an induced, a hypnotized stillness. That's merely a result. Trying to become still in order to experience reality is another form of escape. There is silence only when all problems have ceased. As the pool is quiet when the breeze stops, so the mind is naturally quiet when the agitator, the thinker, ceases. To put an end to the thinker, all the thoughts that he manufactures must be thought out. It is no good erecting a barrier, a resistance against thought, because thoughts must be felt out. When the mind is still, reality, the indescribable, comes into being. You cannot invite it. To invite it, you must know it. And what is known is not the real. So the mind must be simple, unburdened by belief and by ideation. And when there is stillness, when there is no desire, no longing, when the mind is absolutely quiet, with a stillness that is not induced, then reality comes. And that truth, that reality, is the only transforming agent. It is the only factor that brings a fundamental, radical revolution in existence, in our daily life. And to find that reality is not to seek it, but to understand the factors that agitate the mind, that disturb the mind itself. Then the mind is simple, quiet, still. In that stillness, the unknown, the unknowable comes into being. And when that happens, there is a blessing. So that's Krishnamurti. And I think this is fully packed.
Yes, it's
What? Yes.
Very fully packed. He just deconstructs the whole content of your consciousness.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Exactly. So when he says, I don't use that word, God, for the very simple reason that you know it, right? So when we say God, we immediately have an image of it,
Right.
of what that is, what that word points to, or what it means. So it's already known. And he's saying what needs,
known is in time.
what's known, yes, exactly, is in time. And the unknowable is timeless.
Right.
So we can never know it in time. And he said that there needs to not even be a longing for it.
Mm-hmm.
What's important here, he says, is to find what is it that disturbs the mind. Because, then he's really talking about the me,
Right.
the image of a me.
Mm.
And he's saying that's what is the constant disturbance of the mind. Actually, what I'm looking for are his very words. Well, I'll do. The eyes just hit this. So, if there were no books, if there were no gurus, if there were no formulas to be repeated, then what would you, then what? Then what? Then you would be with what this self that you take yourself to be, that we've identified ourselves with, you would be left with that.
Well, it's like he's also saying that if you didn't have all those escapes,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yeah.
All those places to disappear into, then you would be left with your suffering.
Yes, and with moments of happiness.
And moments of happiness.
That's right. And then you would ask yourself the question,
what?
Why do I suffer?
Right.
What is this suffering? Mm-hmm. Then you start exploring, investigating inside yourself. Mm-hmm. What is this all about? Because then we don't have an escape of an image of a God that's either going to save us or something that transcends us.
Right.
And because he said the minute we do that, we're creating an image of what that is. So really, when we talk about the self with a capital S, really, unless we know it, and you can't know it, unless we be it, unless we actually are it in realization of it. It's another concept, isn't it?
Yes.
So we're going from one concept to another concept. So he's saying, look at that, what's disturbing this mind. Look at the content of your consciousness.
Well, it's like he's saying, if you stop looking outside
Yeah.
and start looking inside,
Right.
then that's what you'll come to. What is it that, why am I suffering? What's the nature of my suffering, the nature of my fear? That brings
Yes.
you another look inward.
That's so it's like and that's where the choiceless awareness comes in, that he always speaks about, to be choicelessly aware. Because again, there's nothing you really can do to free yourself of this me, because any formula or any method that we devise to free ourselves of this me is going to come from the me.
Right.
So he speaks about choiceless awareness. And what is that actually? When we look at a tree or a flower, it's easier to look at nature. Easier to look at nature than it is another person. I mean, you could also perhaps look at an animal. But let's say we look at a tree. If there's an awareness of a tree and you don't name it as a tree, you come to it fresh with no name. And certainly you're not coming to it with it's an oak tree or a maple tree, or there's no botany involved in this. You're just looking at this tree, this appearance in consciousness. And there's an awareness of it. And in that awareness of it, before the mind comes in and says, it's beautiful, it's ugly, it's big, it's small, there's just a choiceless awareness of this thing that we have labeled tree. In the same way, can we now look inward choicelessly to see what's going on? The thoughts that are jumping around in this mind, the images, the pictures, the feelings, the emotions. Can we, with that same kind of an awareness, choicelessly, that we're looking outside, can we turn that inside and look choicelessly at this me and its movement, right? And the me includes all the thoughts, the feelings, everything we've identified with, the senses, the body. Can we, in the moment, fresh, without the eyes of the past, just look, just observe. And he says that in that seeing is the doing, and in that doing is the dissolving in that moment of this me. In that moment, right? So there's an awareness of a thought, and it's a fear thought. Just the awareness of it, choicelessly aware of it, without analyzing it, without even at that moment trying to understand it or solve it, just the awareness of it, full awareness of it. In that moment, it ends. Now, that doesn't mean that in the next moment it's not going to come up again. And obviously, as it keeps coming up, we're going to have to think it out. What's in it? What's it about? What does it point to? Always exploring. Always exploring. What is this? What's in this? So he says here, and you would want to know, why you suffer. And you couldn't escape to God. But then he said, eventually you would create a God to escape to. But let's say we stayed with that. Let's say we stayed with that. And all we're left with is what's going on inside of us at that moment. We're not projecting now a future because that's another escape. And we're not dwelling on the past because that's another escape. But in the now moment, there's a watching. And in that watching, a seeing. No escaping. Can we stay with that? Takes a lot of energy to stay with that. And that means we'd really have to watch what the mind then does. So there's an awareness of a fear thought. And the mind then jumps in. You shouldn't be afraid. Why are you so afraid? And all the associations that the mind brings in with fear. Can we stay empty for the moment? Then he says, but if you really want to understand the whole process of suffering as a new man, as a new person, obviously, inquiring and not escaping, then you will free yourself from sorrow. Then you will find out what reality is, what God is. But a man in sorrow cannot find God or reality. Reality can be found only when sorrow ceases. When there is happiness, not as a contrast opposite than sorrow, not as an opposite, but that state of being in which there are no opposites. The state of being in which there are no opposites is non-duality.
Yeah.
Right? So the unknown, that which is not created by the mind, cannot be formulated by the mind. That which is unknown cannot be thought about. Well, let me ask you, so jump in. What do you hear in this? What are you hearing? Rita, unmute yourself. Unmute. Wait a minute. Where's Rita? I don't see you. Rita, unmute. I don't see you.
She just zoomed in.
Oh. Rita, are you there?
Okay, maybe she'll
All
come
right.
back.
Yeah.
Anyone else have a thought you want to share about this reading?
I mean, it's definitive. I mean, you know, I think Krishnamurti really hits it on the nail. And every time you do a reading on it, all the readings that I do on it are unbelievable. I mean, a softer version of Krishnamurti is Gene Klein, which I'm also reading, but
Yes.
he's a softer version. He's not as definitive as Krishnamurti. If you really want to get to the roots of it, and I think what I'm getting from your reading and the readings from Krishnamurti is that if you accept that you are not the ego, if you accept that you are awareness, present awareness, then what he's talking about is the suffering belongs to the ego.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you can get to the point where you realize you're actually realizing, you know, you're not your body, you're not your mind. Well, what are you? You're this present awareness which gives light and illuminates your consciousness or this body and this mind, but that's not really what you are. It's the thing behind it. Then all the suffering that he's talking about belongs to the ego. So when you take the ego out of play, what are you left with? You're left with what you really are.
Right.
And that thing that can't be described, that can't be put into words, but you have all kinds of attempts at it, all kinds of pointing to it. That's what you are. That doesn't hurt. That doesn't have pain. And that's what I get at. That's God.
Mhm.
And but to tell you the truth, a long time ago, maybe 30, 40, 50 years ago, at some point I figured out that man can't possibly know what God is. I mean, can you imagine a mere human being knowing what your creator is? You got to be kidding. That's the ultimate arrogance. I mean, that's the way I see it. So at some point, 40 years later, now I'm beginning to find out that people have put this into words that can be expressed, like Krishnamurti and the rest of them. So I think this is wonderful. I'm not realized. I can't realize it, but I'm still suffering. But it helps a great deal to know what's happening, and it really boils down to how much effort I want to put into it.
Mhm.
And I don't stay at this thing 10 hours a day. Maybe I don't even stay at it half an hour a day, but I try to give it as much attention as I can. And it's certainly helped me understand my suffering and accept it. I think that's a big thing this is giving me this acceptance of, hey, you want to play around with the ego? That's rough company. It's like walking down certain streets in Brooklyn or maybe Times Square at an indecent hour. That's it.
Good, Hugo.
Thank you, Yuka.
Oh, thank you, Krishnamurti.
Yeah, Kevin.
Hi, I'm Kevin. It's really good to be here. It's great reading, Evelyn. It's beautiful.
Good.
I got familiar with Krishnamurti back in the 80s. He used to be on a weird cable channel in New York City. And I got a book by him, and I ended up using one of his quotes for an art exhibit that I did, which was, the quote was, if you want, you can be deceived. And today I spent, until I got here, in want.
Uh-huh.
Mm.
And it was rough sledding. I was asked to stay here all day waiting for Safelite to come and repair a window on my car. And, an 8-hour window that they had me to stay home.
Right.
And instead of just getting into the moment, I was anticipating, where are they, blah, 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 And then at 3:30, I got a text, which I didn't see for another hour, saying, we've canceled your appointment.
Oh, no.
So, I got upset, and then it was like, you gotta be kidding. And I had set my timer for this meeting earlier today. So that went off. And I was like, what did I set for 6:45? Oh, okay. The other thing I wanted to say, that my wife and I worked for, I told Dr. Moschetta this, that we worked for this actor that lived in East Hampton for a while, Terrence Stamp. And Terrence was a student of Krishnamurti's and Nisargadatta Maharaj. He went to India to be with both of them. He left acting. He left London in 1968 or 69 to go be with them. And he used to quote Krishnamurti, and he would say, "You and your God." And I never knew, it was out of context. And I sort of knew what he was talking about, but he didn't, like the reading that you read, it had the whole thing.
Yeah.
They don't leave you out there hanging.
Right, right.
And it's not even a put down. It's sort of a U-turn back into this. I couldn't get to this today. I got to this tonight, thanks to you guys. Thank you.
Great.
Good.
Beautiful. Great.
Good.
Yeah. I thought the question was kind of humorous, with Krishnamurti coming back and giving him both barrels of his shotgun. You never mentioned God. Oh yeah, well, what about this?
Yes.
And it's the mind that really, I see it myself, of course, is that I want to objectify things so I can understand them. So you have to objectify God to try to understand what God is. But that's the fallacy. As soon as you try to put shapes and sizes and so forth around him, you've lost the real meaning of what reality or God or consciousness is.
Right.
That was one thing. And the other thought was sorrow. What's wrong with sorrow? Reality, he says, reality can't be found if you feel sorrow. But I'm not sure I quite agree with that. I think in an absolute sense, I understand that sorrow, happiness, maybe that's dualistic, but still sorrow is it's a genuine, honest feeling that comes up. And it may be associated with the ego, it may not be, I don't know. But I wouldn't want to demonize a feeling, especially sorrow.
Yes. Well, I know he has said that if we're able to stay with sorrow, stay with it.
Yeah, I think also he would make a distinction between the little sorrows that plague all of us, right?
Yeah.
The little sorrows of my frustrated desires or my anxious, worried fears. But then there's the sorrow of the suffering that results from being self-identified and attached to the contents of my consciousness. That suffering, I think, is what he takes very seriously and says, that's the suffering that can be a window into your true self if you get to the bottom of that suffering.
Yes. And it's not even.
I remember.
I'm sorry.
But I remember being at a talk. I think we were in person, and I remember being so struck. And the only way, and especially the way Krishnamurti talks, and he said, "Can't you feel the sorrow of humanity?"
Yes.
You can't just take a moment. Can't you feel the sorrow of humanity in yourself? It was a very vivid moment for me anyway, when he said that. It just seemed, the other thought that I had listening to him And I don't want to go off on any kind of a political tangent, but I was just yearning to have a public leader who would talk to the populace with the same kind of direct frankness about, the real problems that we face, and just as human to human, and as what we have now. But it's just wonderful when somebody just looks you in the eye and starts to just take down one veil after another in a caring kind of way that allows you then to just be sitting with the rawness of your existence.
Yes.
But he's only listened to by ears that want to listen. That's the problem.
That's right. Well, but everybody's has their
Yeah,
time.
Sure.
Everybody has their own time.
Yes, and it's what you're ready to hear
Yeah.
and what you want to hear. I think what you said about the universal sorrow,
Mhm.
I think if we can actually feel that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's expansive,
Yeah.
isn't it? That kind of takes you away from this me. And
Well,
that's not an escape, because there is suffering and sorrow universally.
There's another little sneaky aspect to it, in that what I've come to understand is that the sorrow, it's not from the outside, it's from the inside. It comes from me. It's not from out there. And
Sure.
I don't know how many years, my feelings were attributed to what was happening out there. It was all on me. The world was against me, what have you. And little by little, I'm getting an understanding that, like Krishnamurti says, by getting to understand yourself, by learning about yourself, moment by moment, being aware, using that awareness, that will help you solve your problems, because the problems are within you. You got to get something within me. I've got to get and face what I am and accept what I am, and then I can do something about it. But when you're in denial or whatever, it's not going to happen.
Right.
To me, that was a big thing, to understand that it all starts from here out. There's stuff coming in on you, but it's basically what's in here that's shaping how I see what's out there to begin with.
Mhm. Evelyn, can you find that line about creativity? Didn't you say something about
Yes.
creation?
Oh yeah, it's when the mind is still. Only can only be
Oh, wait.
when the mind is still. It's the only time it happens.
When the mind ceases to create,
Right.
there is creation.
Right.
When the mind ceases to create, then there's creation, because it's not of the mind,
Right.
which is the me.
Right.
The mind can only deal with old stuff, with memory. That's what thought is based on, in memory. And beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yes. When the mind is still, reality, the indescribable, comes into being. You cannot invite it. To invite it, you must know it. And what is known is not the real. So the mind must be simple, unburdened by belief and by ideation. And when there is stillness, there is no desire, no longing. When the mind is absolutely quiet, with a stillness that is not induced, then reality comes. And that truth, that reality, is the only transforming agent. is the only factor that brings a fundamental, radical revolution in existence in our daily life.
So a mind that's burdened, has short-circuited its creativity.
Yes, of course.
So can one imagine, if we as a species had an unburdened consciousness, the explosion of creativity,
Mhm. Yeah, that's a good point.
right?
That's right. That's right.
Well, we're all limping along with overburdened minds.
Yeah, but he talks when,
Casting a shadow on my natural brilliance.
Oh, my natural, there is no my. There is a, and now I think this is a really important sentence. And to find that reality is not to seek it, but to understand the factors that agitate the mind, that disturb the mind itself. Understand the factors that agitate the mind, that disturb the mind itself. Then the mind is simple, quiet, and still. In that stillness, the unknown, the unknowable, isn't that beautiful? The unknowable, we cannot know it.
Mhm,
We can only be it,
mhm.
comes into being. And then when that happens, he says, that's a blessing. So it seems it always comes back to it. That's my understanding. Is this me? And the question always is, can it be dissolved? How do we dissolve it? And is there a how? He says, really, there can't be a how because then there's a method.
Mhm,
And that's just coming from the me again.
mhm.
But choiceless awareness, which is what we fundamentally are,
Moment to moment.
moment to moment.
Yep.
Easy, without any force. It has to be very easy, very gentle. We have to be very careful. There's a tendency when there is a seeing of something that we label as ugly or bad or cruel or unkind, there's a tendency to beat yourself up. And then you're just back in the me.
Another
we're
thing.
back in that paradox again. The harder you seek it, the further it eludes you, but yet you still have to have some energy to sort of encounter this philosophy or this way of being that we're talking about.
Yeah.
So that seems to be the paradox, is if we seek too much, we push it away, but yet we have to be, there has to be motivation.
Well,
Yes, no?
yeah, but so, okay, so if it makes sense, and it seems to make sense, that if the me is the mischief maker, and one wants to be free of that mischief maker, and one of the ways, or the way to be free of it, is just with choiceless awareness. Just be choicelessly aware of how it moves. That releases energy. because the me takes up a lot of energy. It saps a lot of energy. So the minute you're able to pull the plug on it, there's energy.
The initial energy, it seems to me, that's required has to be the energy that goes into noticing,
Yes.
right?
Witnessing.
Witnessing. That's right. I was thinking, of a funny scene. Suppose you have a friend, you've known him for a long time, and he's kind of like, pretty much a garden variety neurotic. He's got a lot of worries and fears. He has highs and lows, just like we all have. And he considered him as one of the guys that's stuck in the same place. We're all living the same life, and suddenly he becomes very peaceful and serene. And one day you go over and you visit him. You say, "Charlie, I have to ask, what's gone on? You seem like you've changed so much." And he says, "Well, I unburdened my mind."
What?
Yeah, what? What do you mean? Well, I unburdened my mind. I started watching all my thoughts and fears, watching them choicelessly. And this is where they took me.
Mhm.
I unburdened my mind. Because I think that's to me, that's really significant here. Just the fact that we're all, working at half capacity here.
I think what I find that can help is another suggestion of Krishnamurti is that when you're aware of feelings, angry, happy, whatever the feelings are, try not to label them, fear, anger, whatever. Just be with the feeling, and that's a struggle, but it works. There are times when I'm able to do that, and whatever that feeling is just seems to go away at some point.
I lost.
Because what happens is when you put a word to it, when you got this feeling, and you say, "Oh, I'm anxious," or "I'm nervous," or "I'm this," or "I'm that," you've reinforced the I, you've reinforced the me. It's been censored through the me, and what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to avert that and not let that censor come into play. Just stay with that feeling and just let it just without wording it. The minute you word something, you've already created a whole
Yes.
a whole conditioning of it.
That's right. That's true. That is very true. Right. Just the way, if you look at the tree without labeling it, suddenly you see so much, right? You see so many more details.
Yeah, Kevin.
Back to what you were saying, I guess this is a quote from Krishnamurti again, when you said we cannot know it, we can only be it. There's a writer that I'm fond of named Jenna Levin, and she's an astrophysicist, and she wrote a book called How the Universe Got Its Spots. And her new book is called Black Holes, A Survivor's Guide. And one of the things that you run into with people that are astrophysicists who are very, very involved in mathematics and theory is that they accept this idea that 5 billion years ago or something, there was a Big Bang. I might be getting the time wrong, but it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And for me, that's where I run right up against this quote, which is, my life experience tells me that you don't get something out of nothing. There can't be nothing and then there's something. I can't go there. So it does lead me back to, you can be. I may never know the answer to that. They say you can't see the face of God and live. So, I don't know, but on a good day I can be,
but there are some questions that the mind creates just by way of being mischievous. There are no answers. I mean, obviously, if there's a Big Bang, then what was before the Big Bang? Well, you
Right.
can't ask that question. It's like asking a question. I want you to really define present awareness, what I am. It's a singular. It's not a dual. And we're communicating. Everything we do is in duality. There's no way of communicating oneness, in a way that you can communicate like we're communicating in duality. So I just accept that there are questions which have no answers. And I'm not going to waste my time asking those questions, because what little I know about science, it's evolving. It's not something that's permanent, that you don't get a definitive answer of what things are. I mean, it started out with there were microbes, and then you got to atoms, and then quarks, and then all kinds of things. Now we're into vibration stuff. Now we've got and we've only been at it for about a couple of hundred years. In 1,000 years from now, there's no telling what we will have gotten. And I think all we get is an ever increasing box that gets bigger and bigger and bigger of what we don't know.
Well, it's like Krishnamurti said, the only book to read is the book of yourself.
Yep.
So it's like coming back to trying to be aware moment by moment of what's preoccupying me, where I am in my thoughts.
Doesn't matter what the question is. It doesn't even matter whether there was a Big Bang or there wasn't a Big Bang, because it all happens in awareness. There is nothing that we can say about anything that's separate from awareness.
Yeah, it's a prerequisite.
Right?
Yep.
So that's the background in which all this appears. And that's hopefully where we can stay in this awareness, especially when it comes to the movement of the me. Well,
Any closing thoughts? Okay.
thank you so much for coming.
See you
Thank
next
you.
week.
Thanks, you
Thank
guys.
you.
Have
Beautiful.
a good week. Have a good week.
You too.
Buenas
Bye-bye.
noches.
See you soon. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.